You don't have to click on it.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming back. I know it's always tough to come back to the conference after lunch. I am delighted to be here on this second panel of Southeast Asian countries. We have four excellent presenters. Following our tradition, we are not going to go into elaborate introductions, but we are going to begin with Pongphisoot Busbarat, who goes by Paul, who is the director of the Institute for Strategic and International Studies in Bangkok, the country's leading think tank and a Weatherhead alum. We are then going to turn to Malaysia with Elina Noor from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, where she runs their Southeast Asia program. Then we'll go to Sufal Ir from the Thunderbird School of Management. And last but not least, and you're last because Hang wants to make sure she hears the Vietnamese presentation, we have Nguyen Hang Hai from Binfast University, who is currently a Fulbright Scholar at American University. So without further ado, Paul, I'll let you take us away.
Hello. Okay. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, and I would like to express my appreciation for the Weatherhead, the New York Southeast Asian Network, and especially Anne-Marie, who invited me to join this discussion today. Even though, I will be staying here for just a few days, flying and arriving this morning. I just came here straight away, but I'm happy to be here and share my view about Thailand under Trump administrations. So let me just, give you a very simple picture of SWOT analysis. When we talk about opportunity prospect of Thai-US relations, probably this kind of swap, analysis picture would give you some sorts of issues that you can put, in these blocks. Thailand and the U.S. have several windows opening, maintaining that relationship for a while. But weaknesses and challenges may also impede, these strengths and opportunity we share. So the strength, probably next slide. So I'll just go one by one. Right. The strength that the U.S.-Thai relationship already possess is actually the long-standing relations. Right. We have known that Thailand is actually the first Asian country entered into diplomatic relations with the United States in the 19th century, 1818 to be exact. And then the treaties between the United States and Siam, the old name was in 1932. So basically, American play important roles in Thailand's modernizations for centuries. So basically, this kind of a positive image of the American contributions to Thailand has been, in people's mind. So that's unavoidable to mention. And this is actually the strength that we have. We have a solid background, to build on, and especially, in the Cold War. Right. Probably Greg said, he's coming. He said probably the Philippines is only a mutual treaty alliance. Thailand actually, is regarded as one of the next one, please. Regarded as one of the security alliance United States, right? Developed during the Cold War, based on Manila Pact, and probably that's mutual defense treaty that is still intact, even though the organization itself already gone, right? And we have a security reassurance under the Russ-Tenat Joint Communique in 1962. So that's kind of a basis of our modern day, interactions, especially in security arenas. So despite the withdrawal of the U.S. troop after Vietnam War, cooperation in security arenas, continues until today, especially when you look at the Copper Gold exercise, right? One of the largest in the Pacific, in the Asia Pacific region. So that's, continue without interruption, even though Thailand faced a lot of military interventions, but Copper Gold still continue in that context. So during the war on terrorism, under the Bush administrations, Thailand was granted the major non-NATO ally as well. So that kind of like these kind of treaty and status, make Thailand one of the key important, Southeast Asian partner to United States. So Thai-U.S. relations are also comprehensive, besides security relations. Next slide, please. So the top leaders, relations is quite close. From time to time there are a lot of high level visit, even though like these days you probably don't see that much. So despite political tensions during the Thai military regime, ties, in other sector continue, right? Like a people-to-people contact, and all the economic relations. The U.S. is like the largest investor in Thailand still, right? So these are like the strength that Thailand and United States share and could have built on. Next one, yeah. So U.S. is still viewed by the Thai as a source of knowledge, a high tech and model for democracy, that kind of thing, reflect probably in this kind of survey that many Thais still look at the United States. It's one of the destination for furthering studies. So that kind of sort of shows that the view toward United States is still quite positive among the Thai people, especially young generations, compared to China, right? I mean, destinations as education is quite still lower these days. So that's probably the strength that we share. If we go to the weaknesses, all right, the next one, there are several weaknesses, especially, Thailand's relying on China, increasingly relying on China economically, politically, and economic dependence on China is very rampant and very large, right? Like trade surplus on the United States is very large as well. It's one of the largest trade surplus countries in Southeast Asia. So despite several strong factors that Thailand possesses, its weaknesses may sort of reduce the ability to leverage the strength to support the Thai-U.S. relations, especially under the Trump administrations. So let me just like go to the detail a little bit, next one. Okay. This one, right? So the Thai-Chinese relations have expanded so deeply and so much, that policy accommodation to China has increasingly become a norm, in Thai policymakers. And the second one, if you look at the Thai's record in human rights, it doesn't look that good, right? I mean, like since, especially it could be one of the problem in the Trump administrations. If you look at several cases, in the past couple of months, the recent Chinese pressure to deport the Uyghur, back to China early this month, that could be one of the case that we might get some criticism from international community, especially when Mark Rubio was mentioning about this at the Senate. And policy alignment with China in support of the Myanmar elections, that the junta was announcing to be held probably the end of this year or early next year. That could be like one of the policy non-alignment or collision between Thailand and United States and other partners. Next slide. So the third factors that probably the weakness of Thailand is that its economic dependence on China. It's very obvious that China and Thailand and China and ASEAN in general, trade has become clearly intertwined, right, and interlinked. So although Thailand has trade deficit with China, and like if you are in Thailand, you probably hardly see or hear, right, that the policymakers or the bureaucracy would emphasize that actually we have a trade deficit. It's just like volume between Thailand and China's trade has increased tremendously. So China, well, it come with that kind of positive image that China could be like our reliable market, for our export. So that pictures is actually very unclear to the Thai public. So the fourth weakness is Thailand's trade surplus with United States, as I was mentioning, quite high. Although it's less than Malaysia or even less than Vietnam, but it is prone to get trade retaliation by Trump administration in the future. So if you look to the opportunity side, next one, several factors that I think I want to point out is that U.S. paying less attention to ASEAN at the current moment, right? I mean, like you see a lot of news about Ukraine, Russia, Israel, but less on ASEAN. And as all the speakers in the morning was mentioning, right, it's still unclear. That could be like a small open opportunities that Thailand could adjust or plan a strategy to deal with the new Trump administration. But we'll talk about that challenge, why we cannot do that. That probably next slide. Yeah, so I was already mentioning about this. So less attention, perhaps, give some opportunity for us to recalibrate our foreign policy and trade policy. But that would not last long. It's just a matter of time, when Thailand can come, to the point where we can get, ourselves intact and just like tackle with these uncertainties. But the next one, right? One of our opportunities or that we probably could see is that even though Thai-Chinese relations is quite warm, recently the image of the Chinese are quite worsened in the Thai public, especially from the so-called gray business operating in Thailand, across Thailand border, especially in Myanmar, scam centers that you probably heard, that portrayed the image of China, Chinese people, or Chinese business as one of the, deteriorating force, in Thai economy and in Thai stability. So China assertiveness, in to pressure the government to manage this kind of business, also give some people unhappiness, right? That China is too invasive, in terms of like, pushing the Thai government so much that we don't have the ability to say or do anything. So some news and the public criticize that we don't have autonomy to manage this problem without the Chinese. So that make a kind of bad image on the Chinese side. Even have among some Thai people, we have a nickname for our own country is like Monton Thai Guo, which means like Thai Guo Sheng. It's like Thailand's province of China, right? So this is like a kind of like the nickname that when we talk about China, so we thought like we one of the province of China. So that's how it reflects, in this kind of Chinese pressures and the Thai government accommodations to the Chinese pressure. So next slide. From this diagram, we can probably see that although Thai hold a positive view of the Chinese, right? If they have to choose more people would decide to choose United States, even though the margin is very, very, very low. But I mean, like it reflects, that kind of preferences among the Thai people. So the last one is challenges. When you look at the challenges in bilateral relations, of course, U.S. Transactional approach, during the Trump administration may create a challenge to Thai government to formulate, its proper policies and strategies. If you look into the next slide, as mentioned in the weakness of Thailand seems to carry a big risk in facing tariff punishment by Trump administrations. Next one, please. So although Trump's view, strategy, policies, and view towards Southeast Asia is still uncertain as we understand. As I suggested earlier, it's just a matter of time, right? So Thai policymakers are still cling on its, ability to navigate the first Trump administrations. That kind of narratives that, you can hear from the top leaders that, well, we benefited from the first Trump administration. We can do it this time. It doesn't seem to have like, a proper new strategies to tackle this new environment and context. So they're not ready to tackle these uncertainties in the future. So and so the last slide, if I want to assess the whole prospect of the Thai-US relations, it might look like this, right? I mean, like we have strengths, we have opportunities, but to leverage these, into our strategies to tackle the uncertainty of the Trump administrations, probably it's very weak, and then we rather face the more challenges because of our weaknesses. It becomes the obstacle to generate the new policies during this Trump term. I'll end here, and I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards.
Thank you very much, Paul. Now I would like to have Elina Noor make her presentation on Malaysia. Hi, Elina.
Hi, Anne-Marie. Thanks so much for accommodating me virtually. It's always really unnerving to see myself on such a large screen through my own screen. I wish I could be with parents and colleagues there in person, particularly at a really interesting time in Colombia. But I'm happy to be joining you on screen nonetheless. So let me offer some thoughts on US-Malaysia relations under Trump. In a period long time ago, in a universe far away, Malaysia and the United States sealed a comprehensive strategic partnership. That was in 2014. And I think many of us have forgotten that there is such a partnership that has been in place for now over 10 years. And I think it says quite a bit about the state of bilateral relations between Malaysia and the US. Because when Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim traveled to San Francisco in November 2023 for the APEC meeting, one of the goals that he had planned to embark on was to try to re-energize the partnership, if not upgrade the partnership. And we haven't heard anything since. Part of that is due to local priorities in Malaysia itself. But I think there's also been a fair bit of preoccupation with domestic issues in the United States itself. And so there hasn't been a convergence of convenient time or priorities since. And for the moment, we're still only about 3 months really into the Trump administration, version 2. Relations between the two countries seem to be in a holding pattern, more so on the Malaysian side rather than the US side. There's been a lot or some criticism in the Malaysian domestic space that Prime Minister Anwar has yet to have a phone call with President Trump. But others in the local scene in Malaysia have dismissed that as really not such a big deal. I happen to fall into that category. I think a call is nice, but it doesn't signify anything of import. And I'll get into why a little bit later. I think right now, as is the case with many countries in the world, especially with April the 2nd coming up and the promised tariff palooza land on the horizon, there is some nervousness about whether Malaysia will be in the firing line. I don't think that if Malaysia were to be in the firing line, we would be at the forefront of it. The trade surplus that Malaysia currently has with the United States, I think as of 2023, is about $26 billion. So not entirely massive, but something still to be concerned about depending on how President Trump feels at the moment and depending on other external factors as well. The Malaysian government has said that the economy is diversified enough in terms of products and markets to withstand any external headwinds. Presumably that includes any tariffs. And I think if you look at the numbers, that actually holds up to measure, because Malaysia actually trades quite robustly with other ASEAN countries, with other Northeast Asian countries, and with Europe and Japan and elsewhere. The only issue is that even though semiconductor chips makes up about 25%, slightly more of Malaysia's total exports to the world, semiconductor chips are actually 60% of Malaysia's exports to the US. And we can talk a little bit more about this in the tech session later on. But I think this also adds further anxiety amongst Malaysian policy circles about what it means for Malaysia to be caught in a tech battle, if not war, between the US and China. And the country has taken some initiatives to ensure itself against those external shocks. But right now, that vulnerability is still laid bare. Malaysia has actually enjoyed quite a bit of investment from the United States over the decades. The United States has always been one of Malaysia's top 3 FDI sources. Last year in particular saw really big ticket investments by tech firms, namely Google and Microsoft, to the tune of $2 billion each. And a lot of this investment is funneled into data and cloud storage services. As a result of that investment by Google and Microsoft, last year, Malaysia enjoyed quite a bit of a bumper season in terms of investment that I don't think will be matched to the same effect in the next 1 or 2 years. But because these investments are so large, one, and infrastructural in nature, right? These data centers are going to be the backbone of sorts for AI advances in the country as well as beyond. The nature of this investment is long-term, and we've seen this as well, this pattern and this trajectory of long-term infrastructural investment in tech from the 1980s, and this is just another iteration of that. The issue, I think, moving forward is whether this will be sustained given the America First policy, and how much of it will actually profit qualitatively the Malaysian side in the long run. Yes, $2 billion by these big tech firms each is a big deal, but when you try to understand the nature of these investments, it's a little unclear exactly how they break down. Are they mainly construction jobs for the next 5-10 years? What sort of capacity building or skills are going to be transferred, for example? What does this mean for talent in Malaysia? There are some talent programs that have been affixed to some of these U.S. tech firm investments in Malaysia. But again, it's really hard to fully grasp the granularity of these agreements simply because they're under NDAs. So I think I would say that right now, Malaysia-US relations are kind of in a holding pattern. There's that usual hum of operational cooperation, even at the defense and security level. But so much of the unpredictability and uncertainty is premised on what takes place in the White House. And thankfully, Malaysia itself has been spared from some of these mercurial headwinds coming from the White House. But I think there is some pressure, unstated pressure, that has been precluding a closer relationship between the two countries, particularly in the last year and a half. And that is the elephant in the room, the devastation and destruction of Gaza by Israel, and the very divergent positions that the Malaysian and US governments have taken on the matter. Prime Minister Anwar has been very vocal about Malaysia's support for the Palestinian cause. Unfortunately, that support gets conflated with support for terrorism in the United States. And it's one of the areas in Malaysia that Prime Minister Anwar has been criticized about. And there have been suggestions that he should maybe tone down this rhetoric in order to get on the better side of Washington. Anwar hasn't really been speaking very much about it as much as he had in the past and as vocally as he had. That said, I think there have been continued movements on the Malaysian government's part in general to try to rubber stamp, or not rubber stamp, but to try to really stamp the mark of Malaysian support for the Palestinian cause, particularly in the most recent wave of violence and brutality. And so you've seen Malaysia be a part of this 7-member group called the Hague Group that was set up earlier this year. You've also seen some moves in international legal frameworks that have both diplomatically and legally really moved forward Malaysia's position on the Palestinian issue in these past few months alone. Past few months alone, but also in the past year. And so a part of this, I think, has spilled over. This difference in opinions about Palestine has spilled over into the ASEAN chairmanship by Malaysia. Prime Minister Anwar has decided that ASEAN should try to diversify its relationships, its strategic relations with other countries, rather than relying on just the US and China. And it's for that purpose that he suggested a second version of the ASEAN Gulf Cooperation Council Summit, but he's also invited China to join the summit. There were plans to have an ASEAN-US summit possibly in May. I'm not sure that that is going to actually happen. And I'm not sure that we're going to see President Trump be at an ASEAN summit in Malaysia later this year either. Now, whether this will be a marker of success of Malaysia's ASEAN chairmanship, I think is up to interpretation. I don't think it really matters, but others may see the fact that, you know, the absence of the US president yet again at an ASEAN summit is going to be not so positive for ASEAN's credibility and image in the eyes of Washington. So I think largely I'll end with saying that US-Malaysia relations still maintain some sort of balance for now. And the relationship is being handled at kind of the working level, but we haven't seen any dramatic movements or shifts, either positively or negatively, at the leadership level. And I expect that this will continue to be the case in the next few years. So let me just pause there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elina, for such a thorough review of Malaysia's view of the second Trump administration. Okay, now we are going to switch to Sopal Ir for a talk about Cambodia.
Well, we'll just get the show going. Oh, you're seeing the wrong slide. Sorry. Let me try to switch it back. Put presenter over here instead.
Tech is such a wonderful thing.
Yeah. No worries.
It unites us, helps us, frustrates us at times.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is not like. I'm sorry.
Switch presenter to this.
Susie to the rescue.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I once had to tap dance for about 10 minutes. The technology was not cooperating on a stage.
Would you like to tap dance first now?
No, no, I don't know how, but I had to make it work. This is showing
Yeah.
that for some reason. I think it's got the so yeah. Actually. Okay, this will have to work. All right, the show has to go on. And first, I want to acknowledge Anne Marie Murphy for making all of this possible, inviting me and creating this entire conference for the purpose of discussing, the challenges and opportunities under Trump 2.0. So, the prospects for U.S.-Cambodian relations under Trump 2. I put you, quote, win some, unquote, and you lose some, and hopefully it'll become clear as to why. I did want to, since we're in the age of AI, make a try at what AI would think the topic would look like in artistic terms. And DALL-E, the image generation tool of ChatGPT, came up with this image here, which was scary to begin with. I mean, the red eyes and the sort of Trump look-alike there in the middle. And so I told it to make another one, and it came up with this even more demonic-looking thing. But anyhow, that's and then I have to say, it has Riem there, so it clearly understands what the implications are on one side versus the other. Trade on one side, security on the other. But let's just go back for a second to an early U.S. investment or bet, and I think we talked about it this morning in the first panel when there was reference made to Hun Manet, the now Prime Minister of Cambodia, studying at West Point. So he was an early bet of the U.S. in terms of giving him the opportunity to come and study and get a USMA bachelor's degree, then a NYU master's in econ here in the United States, finishing with a PhD at the University of Bristol. Here he is with his diploma in hand at West Point, and now as Prime Minister of Cambodia. So, really, I think a bet that many hoped would pay off in terms of the relationship between the United States and Cambodia down the road, being the oldest son, the oldest child of Hun Sen. Now, let's just take a brief tour or review back to Trump 1.0 and see where that relationship stood when in the first administration. And, on 4th November of 2016, it was very clear where Hun Sen stood with respect to who he wanted to win for that election. I mean, he kept repeating this over and over. Hun Sen endorses Trump for world peace. And he said, if Trump is elected, the world will change and be in a better situation because Trump is a businessman and business doesn't want to wage war. So very clearly understanding that, business is opposed to war. So as a businessman, there wouldn't be war under Trump. And so it's got to be a win-win, in other words, which is a favorite phrase of Hun Sen's anyways. And then he got to meet his hero at, I think this was it must have been a Philippine-hosted event because of the shirts, but certainly an ASEAN summit of some kind. And 2017, the thumbs-up shot there, and subsequent exchanges that were made. But some of the areas in which there could be risk in terms of, or opportunities, depending on how one looks at it. I mean, if there's tariffs on China on solar panels, for example, and other electronics, if they offshore it to Cambodia, there will be opportunity in the export of made in Cambodia products to the United States that would avoid such tariffs, unless, of course, this reciprocal tariff policy determines that Cambodia is somehow unfairly trading and needs to be punished for that reason. But you can see the trends here. 2017, nothing, and by 2023, $2.83 billion in solar panels and other electronics exported to the U.S. from Cambodia. Now, during Trump 1, there was a tweet that Donald Trump did post that said, "Thank you to the beautiful country of Cambodia for accepting the At Carnival cruise ship Westerdam into your port." This was at the beginning of COVID, and the Westerdam could not find a port at which to anchor so that its passengers could finally get off. The United States will remember your courtesy, and I assume he's copying the CEO of Carnival Cruise, Mickey Arison. Now, the prospects under Trump 2.0, unfortunately, are more cloudy or murky, and it's really a black box because, as others have said this morning, we can't really tell what's going on. I mean, is there attention being paid to Cambodia or to Southeast Asia in particular, or is it a benign neglect, or what exactly is going on? To provide a little context, there are obviously Trump supporters in the Cambodian American community. This is a picture from the Los Angeles Times of Trump's headquarters in Long Beach, Cambodia town, that suggests that they're there. I mean, I think there were definitely Cambodian Americans at January 6th, and they're quite rabid supporters. So, Cambodians for Trump 2024 shirts. What are Cambodia's strategic response possibilities for the situation in Trump 2.0? You can do public praise for Trump. I mean, if he is listening, he certainly likes that. The Cambodian People's Party, which is the ruling party in Cambodia, and the regime can publicly praise Trump for, and has obviously very much appreciates the cutting of Voice of America and Radio Free Asia, while further consolidating power domestically. I mean, they want to do that. And accelerating alignment with China is another response where, if China is replacing U.S. aid, and I completely understand, it's not Chinese aid replacing U.S. aid, it's Chinese loans at market interest rates. It's Chinese foreign direct investment. These are not substitutes per se, but if they continue to do hundreds of billions of dollars, possibly even billions, then this won't have much of an impact. U.S. aid in Cambodia was only in the tens of millions of dollars per year anyways. The first 2 months of 2025, already, of course, nearly 80% of Cambodia's total investment capital originated from China. So it's dominant in that realm. And of course, Cambodia could engage with middle powers in seeking more deals with Japan, South Korea, and others to hedge against complete dependence on China. The requisite letters, of course, were sent where Hun Manet sent a congratulatory message to Donald Trump upon his election, as did his father, now the president of the Senate of the Kingdom of Cambodia, and so these are just typical diplomatic notes that are highly congratulatory. The challenges to Trump's foreign policy are manifold, but I'll just cite three here. There's obviously increased geopolitical risk, wherein the U.S.-China rivalry in Cambodia is intensifying, and Trump's indifference to regional stability means Cambodia may face economic risks. There's also economic vulnerabilities. Cambodia does rely very much on the U.S. for its exports to the tune in 2022 of $12 billion. And American investors are wary of growing Chinese control over Cambodia's Sihanoukville. I mean, the scam operators, there was speculation, I think, early on when Trump won that if there was enough scamming of Americans, especially maybe MAGA hat-wearing Americans, there could be some repercussions. But so far, I think they're balancing that in terms of there's just not maybe enough yet, or it hasn't caught the attention of the Trump White House. Balancing act difficulties. Cambodia has to navigate this complex relationship between major powers, and so it has to maintain economic stability and political autonomy in an increasingly polarized geopolitical environment, which means that, at some point, the speculation from the economists here in the headline is Cambodia slipping out of China's orbit? I mean, is it? Is it not? There are more signs of it. In 2024, there was not any loans from the BRI issued to Cambodia. And despite the fact that there was too much fanfare that the Techo-Funan Canal of $1.7 billion announced with like, oh, we're going to get lots of money from China. The Chinese were like, no, we haven't agreed to that necessarily. We're not going to talk about it in public, but it's clear that the construction hasn't really gone full force. And there are regional worries about U.S. retrenchment, the usual sort of unreliable partnership complaints, the security vacuum. The cancellation back in 2017 of Angkor Sentinel, there's discussion of resumption of that, but it hasn't been finalized. And in terms of economic fears, the fact that Cambodia relies on that U.S. trade makes it very sensitive to the possibility of facing tariffs. So what are some of Cambodia's response possibilities to U.S. disengagement? Well, you've got to strengthen intra-ASEAN trade. You've got to increase regional security cooperation. You've got to, maybe you end up deepening Chinese partnerships where Ream Naval Base, for example, becomes even more so dependent on Chinese support. Even if they've chosen to have Japan be the first country to visit the base officially, it's a smart move because it signals that, hey, at least China isn't the first one visiting the base, because that would signal the wrong kind of message. And you've got to explore non-U.S. partnerships, right? Japan, for example, as I mentioned, is expanding its Mekong region investments, and so it's a possible way out of the choices of either U.S. or China only. Just to put some key data points in front of you, the fact that there's 40% Chinese FDI in Cambodia really does make it very dependent on China. And then the 12 billion U.S.-Cambodia trade makes it dependent on the U.S. in terms of where it exports and where its money comes from. The Funan Techo Canal, again, a project that seems pharaonic almost in terms of how grand it is and how much Vietnam is displeased by this, but also where is it going to find the money for that? And is it willing to actually use its own money if China doesn't come through with it? And of course, the fact that the garment sector relies very much so on it's 40% of Cambodia's GDP. U.S. withdrawal has meant that China is stepping in the fact that, some of these opportunities for America First approach has meant that Cambodia is enjoying the fact that USAID, VOA, Voice of America, Radio Free Asia are no longer thorns in the side of Phnom Penh. So it benefits the authoritarian regime. And of course, the reduced human rights scrutiny is just music to their ears, right? I mean, as long as you're not talking human rights, they like that. And, this could also mean closer economic ties with China, where Trump's withdrawal from multilateral agreements means that Cambodia is doubling down on infrastructure projects, if they even take place. But, China, of course, is liking the fact, I'm sure, that USAID isn't there anymore, and the fact that the money went to civil society is going to hurt the enemies of the authorities in Phnom Penh. So all of these venerated institutions are shutting. The Solidarity Center has shut down. That was the labor rights NGO that is an extension of the AFL-CIO in Cambodia. So it's really devastating, as well as, they've achieved what the KGB couldn't do in 83 years of VOA operations, to finally dismantle the VOA and its sisters. So, while the Chinese state media is openly celebrating the lie factory that VOA was, quote unquote, and this is not me writing that Hun Sen was a former dictator here, but I just did a screenshot, so it's a retweet, not an endorsement. But he praised Trump for saying the move would help eliminate fake news by shutting down VOA. NHK reporting the same, that Cambodia welcomes Trump's shutdown of the Voice of America, and Hun Sen praises Trump for dismantling the U.S.-funded Radio Free Asia. So, has the United States already forgotten Cambodia's courtesy during COVID and the Carnival cruises, docking at its port? Trump has put Cambodia on a list of 43 countries to have their visas revoked, right? So you've got Asian countries like Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, and North Korea, of course. So these are the red list, orange list, and yellow list countries, and Cambodia figures in the yellow list countries. So not quite red list, where definitely don't want those people, and then the orange list where it's definitely sketchy. But they've got 60 days to address concerns. I'm not quite sure what concerns these are, but they've got 60 days, whatever they are, to resume visa issuance or to clean up their house. And the authorities in Cambodia had this to say. So Chum Sun-ri, spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, said that he had not yet received any official information on Cambodia being placed on the U.S. yellow list. The ministry is seeking additional information through diplomatic channels, and he claimed that Cambodia has recently reaffirmed its commitment to working with the U.S. to expedite the repatriation of Cambodian citizens. So he thinks it means take your citizens back, the deportees, and so on. So there won't be an obstacle that could hinder this process. Quote, based on Cambodia's full cooperation in repatriating Cambodian citizens from the U.S. and the two nations' current good ties and cooperation, I believe that Cambodia will receive a positive evaluation from the U.S. Maybe wishful thinking, maybe it'll turn out the way he'd like. Anyways, Cambodia and the U.S., friend or foe or both. I think the bottom line is what's Southeast Asia's value proposition to the U.S.? I mean, it's trade access in terms of Cambodia needs the U.S. market to for access to its garment sector. It would love to get, obviously it continues to want these infrastructure deals. Now, that's something that China has been certainly much more helpful in. And in terms of regional integration, it's got to prioritize intra-Asia trade under RCEP, because if it wants to diversify the dependence on the U.S. market, it's got to go outside of the U.S. to try to sell and be more able to bring in foreign exchange. And obviously, under Trump's transactional diplomacy, the countries of Southeast Asia, including Cambodia, must offer tangible benefits to Washington to maintain ties. So it's always, what are you bringing to the table? It's like a mafia boss, right? What do you have for me, and for you to even kiss the ring? So I think that Cambodia has got to come up with either better terms for U.S. firms in terms of investment, trade privileges, and so on, security cooperation, or it'll be simply, ignored. And so the final takeaways are, there are some strategic implications. Long-term diminished U.S. influence in Southeast Asia. Obviously, this is going to happen if we ignore, or even if we are there but are rude about it, which were the two options discussed this morning. ASEAN division, well, there could be a split response between how China-aligned countries and those who aren't China-aligned react. And then finally, this could be an opportunity for Hun Sen to leverage U.S. disengagement to eliminate oversight. I mean, he is, I think, very clearly thankful for this, but I think he got a gift without having to give anything. He just got the gift of VOA being eliminated, USAID being destroyed, RFA being gone. In exchange for what? Will he be willing to give something back as a result of that, or is it just an incidental present that he received? So Cambodia serves as a prime case study in this sense for U.S. retrenchment, possibly accelerating China's dominance in Southeast Asia. And the long-term challenge for the U.S. is whether to reinvest in soft power and economic ties in the region or accept a diminished role, allowing China's influence to dominate. anyways, hoping this helps in our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sopal. Okay, and for our final presentation, we're delighted to have Nguyen Hong Hai.
Sorry.
It's on.
I
I
think
think
it's
it's on.
It's already?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me join my other colleagues before me and also on the same panel to thanks the West Head Institute's the Southeast Asia Study Network, more particularly Chị Liên Hằng and also Anne Marie for inviting me to join and speak on Vietnam-US relations under Trump 0.2 as we offered call. And I first of all, I just want to remind that this is my own view, not the government, the Vietnamese government view, because you might find some of my views and some of my argument is identical with the Vietnamese government. So I'm here as a Fulbright visiting scholar at American University. I'm particularly research on Vietnam and U.S. relations, looking through the lens of trust. And my presentation today is also a book chapter that I'm going to write and publish in a volume. So I put the title of my presentation is Trust, Optimism versus Challenges in the relationship between Vietnam and the Trump 0.2. So I think, first of all, when we talk about Vietnam-U.S. relations, I'm sure that it will be a topic for decades to come, given the fact that U.S.-Vietnam relation is a very special one. It's a special one because I think the lack of nature and also of reality. The lack of nature because I'm the last speaker on the panel because, as you see on the alphabetical table, Vietnam and the U.S. Yeah, they have the same, right, next to each other. And if you see in all multilateral forums, Vietnamese leader always stand next to side by side with American president or any other one. So because of the alphabetical. So that's why, yeah, it's one lack. Another lack is Vietnam and the US had a war, just the fight, right, with each other. And in Vietnam, we often say, without fighting, we don't know each other. I don't know whether it's bad or what it might be a luck in Buddhism's views. That's the reality is that the relationship between Vietnam and the US goes back further that many of you might have thought about or known about. Back in 19th century, Thomas Jefferson already went to Vietnam to collect rice seed to grow in his farm in Virginia. And of course, during the Second World War, Vietnam and US have a relationship. And back then in 1940s, when Ho Chi Minh is the leaders of Viet Minh and also in letters to President Truman, who already said that Vietnam really want to establish full collaboration with the US. So this is the very background before I just want to go into the relationship between Vietnam and Trump. Now, when we talk about Vietnam, US under Trump, that means we have to talk about Trump 1 and Trump 2. Right. So let me provide quickly about relationship between Vietnam and US under Trump 0.1, 1.0 first. Now, as we know, when former President Trump was re-elected on the 5th of November, top Vietnamese leaders follow international peers, quickly send congratulatory message to Trump. And of course, they expressed the hope that the U.S. relation and Vietnam relation will continue to develop as during his first term in office. Now, there is solid ground for optimism when we can talk about Vietnam-U.S. relations, even though, as I said, the two countries was bound by lack of natures and also reality.
And in fact, if you see if there is a parameters and also a graph showing the progress of the relationship between Vietnam and the U.S., you can see it's a continued improvement even in the last 8 years. 8 years that mean under the Trump one and also Joe Biden's one and also hopefully the next one. Now, at the beginning of his first terms, Vietnam, as you know, was very proactive, while, as you know, many other was improactive, and even was in a very passive position when Trump, as a businessman, was elected into the White House. But Vietnam was very proactive. As you know, Vietnamese Prime Minister was the first Southeast Asian leaders, was welcomed by President Trump to the White House. And it was a very surprise visit by many other people. And of course, as you know, that during his campaign during the first terms, he always picked up Vietnam as one of the very bad examples of trade surplus between Vietnam and the U.S. Even though at the times, the amounts of trade surplus only $38 million only, completely different from the current trade surplus level. Now, so the positive relationship between Vietnam and U.S. Also continue, as you see, under the Biden administration, and of course in 2023, the two countries also upgraded to Comprehensive Strategic Partnership as CSP. Now, of course, the CSP was upgraded based on also the good foundation of the relationship between Vietnam and the U.S. under Trump 1.0. So seeing the two countries, as you know, normalized diplomatic relations 30 years ago, and this year is also marking the 30th anniversaries of diplomatic relations between Vietnam and the U.S. And Trump was the only and so far the first the president who in office has visited Vietnam twice. More particularly, the first visit happened in his first years in office. That have never happened in the past 30 years. And the second visit to Vietnam took place in 2019 when he held a summit with North Korean Kim Jong-un. And it was Trump, as I heard, selected Vietnam as the venue for the summit with Kim. So, of course, when we was in Hanoi, he was invited and had a meeting with the Secretary General and the late Secretary General of the Communist Party of Vietnam back then, with Phu Trong. And of course, at the meeting, he also extended the invitations to Mr. Trong to visit the U.S. So if things went well in 2019, late Secretary General Chow already visited the United States, and who knows, the CSP might or even was upgraded even sooner than under Trump. So, and also another very important or noticeable development during Trump 1.0 is that all other senior officers of the Trump administration visited Vietnam, including the Secretary of State, the first one, Rex Tillerson, Mike Pompeo, Secretaries of Defense, Mark Esper, James Mattis, and National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien. So this is the first background of the Vietnam-U.S. relations under Trump 1.0. One more point I just want to emphasize before I move on to the second Trump. That is the COVID-19. As you know, when COVID-19 hit the world, the United States, and of course in Vietnam, and the Trump administration already asked Vietnam to provide some kind of assistance, medical equipment, devices, etc. And Vietnam immediately responded to Trump's administration's request. So I think by that kind of action, it clearly shows the friendship, the trust, and the well-developed partnership between Vietnam and the U.S. And I just pick up one of a very important compliments by the former U.S. ambassador to Vietnam back then, Daniel Christian Brink. Of course, diplomat is a diplomat, you know that, and they always use beautiful words. But anyway, this is what Daniel Christian Brink said. Well, Vietnam's aid to the United States is very important, and Vietnam is a friend in need, is a friend indeed. So, and also he emphasized that the sky is the limit of the U.S.-Vietnam partnership. So that's, you can see the backgrounds of Vietnam-U.S. relations of the Trump administration. And now we move on to the second one. Now, what I said, 2025 is a very important year for the two countries. It marked two important milestones. The first one is the end of the Vietnam War, or the Vietnam, the war for reunification, as we often say in Vietnam. And the second milestone or important event is the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Vietnam and the U.S. So, as I mentioned, in Vietnam-U.S. relations, the key point between Vietnam and the U.S. relations is trust, and trust remains there forever, given the fact of the backgrounds and the histories of the relationship between Vietnam and the U.S. And of course, as we all know, that trust is very important in international relations, right? And more crucially in the U.S. and Vietnam relations. Now, the increase of trust, of course, from my point of view, it goes hand in hand with optimistic spirit. Sometimes, of course, trust requires concrete action, tangible action, but sometimes we can't expect a tangible action immediately, right? And we need to rely on optimism, right? If we look at the situation between Russia and Ukraine now, right? Without trust, you can't go to anything. Right? So even though we need to rely on trust, and that's why, again, between Vietnam and the U.S., trust is important. Now, the trust is important and optimisms in the relationship between Vietnam and the U.S. over the course of 30 years. In 1995, as you can see, it's very high, regardless who is the president of the United States. And that president comes from whatever the party in the United States. And also in over 50 interviews conducted with my authors of this of the book chapters that I'm writing, and also this is the presentation of mine today, including with great polling. Thank you very much for the viewpoint. And also officers and scholars, legislators, both in Hanoi and Washington, D.C. so far in the past nearly 6 months. They all spoke about Vietnam-U.S. relations with high optimism. Experts and the former journalists of very well-known magazines who was in Hanoi even before the normalization of diplomatic relations between the two countries, and has spent over 30 years researching and writing about Vietnam-U.S. relations. He noted that Vietnam has long received bipartisan support in the U.S. Congress, and geopolitical and geoeconomic changes and challenges. Now, we know the returns of President Trump in the second term is something Vietnam has prepared, I would say, and everyone has prepared for that, right? It's completely different from the first one. So compared to 8 years ago when Trump first entered the White House, I think the context of Vietnam-U.S. relations this time has 5 differences. The first difference is Vietnam clearly understands who is Trump. Hopefully, right? And also what he wants, and of course Vietnam is ready to flexibly respond to Trump needs. The second one is economic engagement between Vietnam and U.S. Its title, as I said, the trade surplus between Vietnam and U.S. under Trump on 1.0 is only $38 million, but now is 125, some say $130 million. But of course, we have to discuss about that because there's some kind of calculations differently between the two sides. So and Vietnam is, that's why Vietnam is actively is now in contact with U.S. partners in order to discuss the real situation, the real problems of trade surplus. Now the third one is a political trust between the two countries. Apparently, when the two countries upgraded their relationship to CSP in 2023, is a clear demonstration of improved political trust. And the fourth one is Vietnam is clearly becoming increasingly important to the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy, especially as U.S.-China relations continue to be tense and unlikely. That's my views to return to a honeymoon period, at least several decades, unless the U.S. remains the most powerful nation rather than a sole superpower. So Trump may not like multilateralism, but we'll focus on bilateral relationship beneficial to the U.S. And of course, the fourth one, the last one is Trump understood Vietnam well. And unlike, he knows where is Vietnam, unlike the Secretary of Defense. Not as just as a war. Vietnam is not a war. It's not just about trade surplus, but I think in terms now, Vietnam is an intermediary bridge to achieve his goals and policy. And a true friend, as I said. Now, these 5 differences in the context between Trump 1 and Trump 2 apparently creates a very optimistic in Vietnam-U.S. relation. And in the past 5 months since President Trump was elected until today, I can find there's a lot of solid grounds to prove the optimisms, including the call by the top leaders of Vietnam with President Trump's and a reliable source that I heard that even when Trump was the candidate of the Republican, Secretary and President Tô Lâm had a call with the candidate, Trump as a candidate before he's going to Cuba. And then, of course, the Prime Minister, the Secretary General, and had the meeting with U.S. businesses. So in my calculation over the last 2 months only, there have been more than 20 delegates from both sides visited the two-side capitals. And in many delegations from the U.S. was received by the Secretary General, the top leaders of Vietnam. That's very unusual, right? Normally, the Secretary never had a reception or have a meeting with the businesses, but he ran his times and had a meeting with the businesses. And he always emphasized that Vietnam consider the U.S. as the partner of strategic importance. That is important. Now, I just want to put a footnote here. For China, Vietnam, you see China as a strategic partner of priority. But the U.S. is a strategic partner of choice. So this is important. And also that is the solid background for the optimism. Now, about challenges. Of course, nothing is on, a pink color, of course. There are also challenges for Vietnam too. As we all know that the suspensions of U.S. aid, and that also affect quite a few, saying many programs. Say, for instance, U.S. aid support on tuberculosis programs or Agent Orange cleanup, unexploded ordinances clearance, Agent Orange victim education, disability project. So a whole bunch of programs affected by U.S. aid. But the good news, really, all right, I don't know other countries, but good news is that all the suspended funding from the U.S. aid to Vietnam has been resumed. That's what I heard from officers from the Department of State. So that's a good news, isn't it? And also a good news I just received from Hanoi is that Vietnam has announced that it will bring down the tariff on U.S. products to Vietnamese market. And also the Prime Minister has already announced and decided that it will give the license to Starlink to provide the internet services in Vietnam. And you know that who is running Starlink. And also, I think it's nothing to hide or secret here is that the Trump organization is also making a huge project investments in Vietnam. They're making investments $1.5 billion in Vietnam. So I'm not saying something like, something on the table is on public, but is what I want to emphasize here is the smart diplomacy of Vietnam. As you know, that Vietnam also faced challenges, but Vietnam haven't taken it as a high profile, haven't spoken it loudly. Of course, it expressed concern, but it did it in a way that good enough in order for the U.S. side to understand the effect and the impact on the two relationships, the relationship between the two countries. So I think I just provide that our own background, and of course I'm open to dialogue. One more thing, if you don't mind, I just want to say about security, defense, and security. That's also one challenge for Vietnam too. As we all see that so far, of course, the Trump administration hasn't paid much attention to the Indo-Pacific and also in the South China Sea. Of course, Vietnam's views on U.S. presence in the South China Sea is very important. Of course, Vietnam welcome presence of the U.S. in the South China Sea, but of course, Vietnam always take a self-defense approach. I think that is something Trump would like it, because the Trump is on the way requires for returns or pay more if a country requires the U.S. to protect, right? So Vietnam doesn't require U.S. to provide any funding for its defense and security. Vietnam welcome its presence in the South China Sea, in the Indo-Pacific. Vietnam has its own approach to deal with the disputes in the South China Sea. So I think that is something aligns with Trump's policy, and that's why I think Trump somehow like Vietnam too. So in conclusions, I just want to say, of course, when President Trump returned to the White House, everyone say that, well, Trump 0.2 foreign policy is a continuation of Trump 1.0 foreign policy, which is characterized by isolationism, unilateralism, and realism. I don't know whether it's true. It's still a debate. But as many have said, that Trump is transactional, unpredictable, and this view seems to have been buttressed by what we have seen in the past 2 months. But many have very tolerant view, say, well, it's still 2 months. We hope that it will change in the next few months. And a common question that we ask, what is going to happen? And of course, we all get the same answer. We don't know, right? And let's wait and see. So I think now on Vietnam-U.S. relation, we don't know. And let's wait and see. And I know that in next week, there will be some Vietnamese delegation, including high-ranking officers from the Vietnamese government visiting the U.S. So that's one way they approach in order to deal with Vietnam-U.S. relations under Trump 0.2. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. We've had 4 very interesting presentations. We're going to bring Elina back in for the Q&A. So I invite questions. Joseph, go right ahead, please.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for the presentations. Hi, Elina. But the question is not for you, Elina. Question is for Hong Hai. I found your presentation the most interesting for 2 reasons. Number one, it's the first time, it's still early days for the Trump administration, but it's the first time I've heard someone say confidently that their country knows Trump. Yeah. So yeah, it's refreshing, the confidence that Vietnam has that you know how to deal with Trump. I think we all need to learn some lessons from Vietnam. In that respect, following up from Anne-Marie's question earlier this morning about Indonesia's role in ASEAN. Can Vietnam play a role in terms of trying to lead a regional effort to engage a Trump 2.0 administration? That's a question. That's the first interesting thing that came to mind about your presentation. The second is, again, your presentation stood out because you hardly triangulated at all with China. Everyone else did. Yeah. So my question is, to what extent the China factor explains the move on the part of Vietnam to really accelerate engagement with the US?
Why don't you just respond, please?
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you very much for the question. It's a very difficult question. Well, with regards to Vietnam's roles in engaging Trump in ASEAN, well, I think diplomatically, I would say, well, Vietnam is willing to do that. If, of course, Vietnam also get the support from other ASEAN countries as well, because you know that ASEAN, how it operates, right, based on consensus. And of course, if it's about regional issues, is all about ASEAN issue, because I think Vietnam was also very sensitive in the sense that it will not try to create some kind of, viewpoints that Vietnam is taking side with the U.S. Of course, Vietnam tried to avoid some kind of misunderstanding of the roles of the U.S. Because so far, of course, no one denied the fact that Vietnam's role is increasing in ASEAN, given the fact of Vietnam's economy, given the fact of the roles of Vietnam in the global supply chains, etc. And also one of the vocal voice in the South China Sea as well. But Vietnam has never been considered, even by any scholars or whoever from outside, as the leading countries in ASEAN or in the region, except Indonesia. Right? Indonesia is always considered as the leader within ASEAN. So Vietnam, of course, will be very sensitive in the sense that we try to, create the views of other countries saying that, well, Vietnam is going to take over the roles of other countries, or trying to create the views that Vietnam is going to, trying to show off itself in the region. So, but again, I think Vietnam has, interest in engaging ASEAN in, Trump in ASEAN too. And Vietnam has know how to do it. And to the second question, the China factor. Well, I think is apparently that when Vietnam's now this have to come back with the Vietnam foreign policy of multilateralization and diversification, right? And of course, Vietnam. So when Vietnam improve its relationship with the United States, it does not mean Vietnam trying to be, taking side with the United States against China. So I think that's some kind of misunderstanding from, many people, because they see that, well, because Vietnam has a dispute with China in the South China Sea, now Vietnam going with the United States. I think this is Vietnam is not taking side with China on the United States. Vietnam is trying to build its defense capability, and whoever can help Vietnam to build up its defense capabilities, and Vietnam will, improve its relationship. As you know, that Vietnam also have, very close defense relationship with many other countries, including Japan, South Korea, and also Europe as well. So the strategy of Vietnam is that, of course, Vietnam is a small country. It have to open its door and have improved its relationship with other countries and try to bring major power in the region in order to help and build its capability.
Okay, Amy Friedman had a two-finger on this question. Let's go to Amy for a minute.
Thanks. Amy Friedman from Pace University. I raised my two finger because, like Joseph, I was thinking about ASEAN and in light of the panel discussion this morning. But my question was actually to Elina on this matter. And I wonder, Elina, with Malaysia's chairing of ASEAN this year, I wondered if you could kind of respond to the point about Vietnam and ASEAN, but in the context of maybe how Malaysia's chairmanship may play out in trying to deepen coalition building and a unified sense out of ASEAN, both in how they're going to deal with the United States, but also internal problems in Southeast Asia, right? Prospects for, a resolution in Myanmar, coping with high levels of inflation in the last couple of years. So I was hoping I could get a little more from you about Malaysia's plans for ASEAN this year.
Sure. I think Malaysia obviously doesn't have any problems with other countries stepping up to the plate and certainly welcomes Vietnam's more prominent role. And it's quite evident that Vietnam is coming into its own even within the ASEAN family. You saw the ASEAN Future Forum have its second iteration in Hanoi just last month. And that was actually mentioned in the ASEAN ministerial meeting statement. So it's almost an indication that Vietnam is going to continue to play an important role in ASEAN as it finds its voice and confidence within the region and beyond. On ASEAN, Malaysia's chairmanship of ASEAN, we've heard a lot of platitudes about how Malaysia is going to try to help steer the ASEAN grouping into a more cohesive and coherent voice, particularly in the light of geopolitical tensions. We haven't heard, though, as much detail about how that's going to take place. So I mentioned the ASEAN GCC China Summit, kind of strategic diversification looking outward. There hasn't been very much talk about how we're going to strengthen the core, the centrality that we keep talking about, and the unity when different countries are looking to other partners outside the ASEAN family for assurance in different ways. And likewise on the internal complications within ASEAN, whether it's on Myanmar, whether it's on the South China Sea dispute, some of the usual rhetoric about the South China Sea Code of Conduct hopefully being concluded by 2026 when the Philippines takes over the ASEAN chairmanship. But on Myanmar, I think some really interesting creative approaches that Malaysia is trying to take. So for example, UNWA has decided to convene this informal grouping of advisors, including Thaksin Shinawat, Retno Masudi, and Giorgio. We haven't heard very much else beyond the fact that he's counting on them as kind of his sounding board for ideas. A lot of speculation about why he chose Thaksin. I think part of the reason is because of Myanmar, and he's just trying to figure out different ways that haven't been tried to move the needle on Myanmar. There's been an appointment of Malaysia's special envoy to Myanmar. Othman Hashim is a career diplomat, spent all of his life at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, very quiet person, very understated kind of personality, which seems odd when you contrast that with kind of the shuttle diplomacy that we're used to affiliating with Martina Telegawar, for example. But maybe that's what it takes to try to move some kind, or try to have some kind of breakthrough in Myanmar, even though that's pretty far-fetched right now. So I think under Malaysia, UNWA is trying to figure out different ways of moving ASEAN further along in the international space. We're not going to see the results immediately, but I think it does set the groundwork for some future progress later on.
Okay, we'll take a couple more questions. We'll go to this gentleman here.
Thank you very much. My name is Nasak Pongsi. I'm a first-year student at SIPA, and I also attended the session in the morning as well. And I think we could probably agree that this highly volatile international landscape presents an opportunity for ASEAN to really come together for common benefits, and perhaps also a follow-up to the earlier question. I think that the very first test to ASEAN centrality is the Myanmar issue itself. And what worries me is the fact that member states might find it difficult to reach a consensus regarding the issue, perhaps due to external pressures, especially from China and from the US. So my question is, in your opinion, how would ASEAN's attempts to address the Myanmar issue be affected by the ongoing strategic competition between the US and China, especially under the Trump administration? Thank you very much.
Is there anybody who wants to speak on that here?
I'm happy to,
Or
respond.
should we get Derek?
Okay,
Go
all right.
ahead.
Okay, so thank you for the question. I try
And
to.
this is going to be the last question on ASEAN because we have a presentation on ASEAN in the next panel, okay? If we could keep the other ones on the topics of the presentations, please go ahead.
Okay, I think the Myanmar issue is very difficult one for ASEAN because the bottom line of ASEAN is non-interference in internal affairs. That's the problem, and also it work on consensus, and that's already make ASEAN weak in terms in the eyes of many other people. So I think it's not going to deal with it easy as long as ASEAN and also no member of the ASEAN can come to good solutions that can get the consensus of all ASEAN. So I think the 5 points now is still the guideline in order to address the case. But now, from my point of view, if if I ask and if you look at from the point of a humanitarian perspective, or if you look at from the human rights perspective, or whatever, it really based on the perspective, so that you can have the solution for that.
Are there any, did you want to jump in, Derek? Are there questions on the other countries, 1 and then 2, and then maybe we'll have to end this? Go ahead in the orange shirt. We'll get you on that in the next session.
My name is Pongphisoot, and I have a question given President Trump's approach to dumping human rights concerns. I was wanting to hear for some people about the potential of this dynamic posing risks to backsliding in terms of governments feeling emboldened to human rights norms. And just from a personal perspective of being in Asia, how can you see this impacting the growth of our future?
Go ahead. You want to go ahead? So
Sure.
Paul.
I mean, I think I talked about it in my presentation about how capitals of regimes that are not friendly to human rights are celebrating, right? I mean, this is music to their ears that these broadcasts from VOA and RFA and USAID democracy promotion programs from NDI to IRI to NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, are all decimated. So there's no countervailing force anymore to prevent these regimes from going all out. It's fantastic for them. It's terrible for the people, though. It's such a setback for democracy, frankly, and for freedom of expression and for an independent press. I don't know how we necessarily recover from this, but I suppose as an academic, one could look at it as a natural experiment of what happens when you pull the rug out from under an entire system and then see whether civil society can survive, whether continuing free press can still exist in some measure. But yeah, it's bleak right now out in Phnom Penh.
Paul?
Well, a similar view. I think for the Thai case, I think this you can see the impact. I probably mentioned briefly about Uyghur repatriations, and that probably the decision making took place in this context that Thai policymakers perhaps didn't really think that Trump administration is gonna respond in the severely with the severe actions, right? Of course, eventually has like, visa restrictions on the official related to this decision making. But then that, you can see that the context that speed up the kind of decision that the Uyghur should be, repatriated back. And then for Thai domestic politics as well, I mean, like U.S. Is one of the models of democracies, and then in that kind of driven youth movement in a couple of years ago, and then when the U.S. ignored this kind of issue, it's sort of like set back this kind of a movement in Thailand. As a teacher, like you face student every years, and new student came in, right? And you can see from the response that they don't have any hope, because there's no dynamic anymore of the student movement or youth movement for democracy. So they're just trying to be pragmatic, and then wait and see what's going to happen. And then a lot of things happening. Like the aid that goes to NGO, civil societies that has been retrenched. So that impact a lot in democracies in Thailand and Southeast Asia in general.
Elina, did you want to jump in on that point, that question?
I didn't hear it very well, so in the interest of time, maybe we can move on.
Okay. I think then we are probably going to cut this off since we're 8 minutes over time already. I would like to offer an opportunity for each of our panelists to make any last point. And Elina, maybe I could just ask you, I heard a former U.S. ambassador to Malaysia make a comment regarding the Gaza issue in U.S.-Malaysian relations, and really downplay it, say that, oh, this is just like, the war, the global war on terror, Afghanistan and Iraq, it'll blow away after a while. That struck me as highly doubtful, but I would love your view on that. So maybe we can ask, if you don't mind answering that question, and perhaps any other last minute comments you have, and then we can go through the group here.
I think the intensity of sentiments in Malaysia around Gaza may blow over, but Malaysia has always been very strong on its Palestine stance, and so it won't blow over. Many of us also still remember the lingering effects of the global war on terror, the Iraq invasion. We still talk about it, and it's not just me. So will it blow over in tone? Maybe, but I'm sure it'll continue, because for many Malaysians, this has been going on for 70 plus years, the Palestine issue. And so it's not going to go away anytime soon. It is going to be one of those very awkward divergence points that's not going to be reconciled in terms of U.S.-Malaysia relations, though. And if things get worse, I'm not sure what kind of inflection point Putrajaya will find itself in with regards to U.S. investment, for example.
Thank you very much. Paul?
Last word. Perhaps you can see this is like what I said, both potential opportunities and challenges. And I think what we can observe from the Thai government policies and strategies now is like buying time. We don't see really clear strategy. We just see the policymakers is trying to see what's happening and then just respond on the ad hoc manners. And I think that could risk, like what you said in the case of in the case of Cambodia, that could accelerate Chinese, influence in the countries. And then you can probably see a lot of a more clearer policy toward China that has been more accelerated in a couple of months, since the Prime Minister visiting China and talk to Xi Jinping, and then following with Uyghur incident, and then Myanmar issue that the Thailand support Min Aung Hlaing, invite him to come to BIMSTEC summit next month. So you can see this kind of the trade-off between like U.S. Playing less role in the regions in Thailand, and then China's could increase its role here. So probably that's observations you can see at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So Paul?
I guess going off of what was mentioned earlier about the Uyghurs, Phnom Penh should not repeat what it did in their own Uyghurs again, right? I learned from what happened in Thailand recently, although I think that was, I'm told, more of a personal thing. Marco Rubio's staff connection with Uyghurs, something or another that triggered that policy. So the decision to do some visa bans on Thai officials. I guess, stay low or keep praising and maybe get some attention, but I doubt Cambodia's big enough fish for Trump to pay much attention.
And last but not least, Thai?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, ASEAN or Southeast Asia is very interesting regions and organization because we don't have, ASEAN doesn't have a common foreign policy like European Union, or so countries, work on their own interest, have their own way to approach the U.S. government. So it really depends on how each country is to see and to protect its interest. So I think, say for instance, Thai or Cambodia or Laos or whoever take their own approach to the U.S. government, to Trump. So I think Vietnam is at the moment is taking its own approach. And of course, it also leverages on, as I mentioned before, a special relationship between Vietnam and the U.S. bound by the histories and bound by the lack of culture of nature. So I think, but anyway, let's see. And again, 2 weeks, 7 days. So we still have, weeks, months, years ahead. So let's see how it goes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much. Elina, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again.